On today's episode, how I won Australia's toughest mudder with women's winner Allison Tai. What has two thumbs and just won Australia's toughest mudder? This Tai. What has two thumbs and likes to recycle jokes? This guy.
This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast.
Welcome back to World's Toughest Podcast. Thank you for listening. My name is Will Hicks. We are the number one rated podcast in all of obstacle course racing, according to Apple Podcasts and Amazon. Thank you kindly. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Toughest Mudder Australia. We're going to talk with the women's winner, Allison Tai. We're going to talk with the men's winner, Lachlan Danzy, and do a deep dive into the numbers on a future episode. Before we start, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at @TheWillHicks and on Instagram at World's Toughest Podcast. You can be a part of the show by leaving a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Amazon.com, and I will read it on a future episode. Those reviews are very important. They are what keep us the number one rated OCR podcast in the world. Thank you. Let's talk about Australia's toughest mudder. Wait, before we talk about Australia's toughest mudder, let's talk about Tougher Mudder Philly. Philadelphia was the first of the 2018 Tougher Mudder Regional Championship races. Top finishers will qualify for the Tougher Mudder World Championships in Seattle on September 22nd. Your top three men at Tougher Mudder Philly were, in first, Brian Gawiski, in second, Ryan Kempson, and in third, Rich Ryan. Top three women were, in first, Alex Chikorita Rodina, in second, Deanna Braz, and in third, Aaron Sonde. Congratulations to the podium winners at Tougher Mudder Philadelphia and to everyone who ran. Now, let's talk Australia's toughest mudder. Australia's toughest mudder was held this past weekend near Brisbane, Australia. Your top three women were, in first, Allison Tai with 35 miles in 7 hours and 6 minutes. In second, Deanna Blegg with 30 miles in 7 hours and 13 minutes. And in third, Christy Davies with 30 miles in 7 hours and 50 minutes. Your top three men were Lachlan Danzy with 45 miles in 8 hours and 18 minutes. Jared Cola with 45 miles in 8 hours and 23 minutes. And in third, Brody Gardner with 40 miles in 7 hours and 22 minutes. Allison Tai finished in first for the women. This is Allison's seventh toughest mudder and her seventh top three podium finish. Allison has more toughest mudder podiums than anyone else, man or woman. Allison finished second at World's Toughest Mudder last year and will be competing in the 24-hour Enduro Championships in Australia in a few weeks. Deanna Blegg finished in second for the women. Deanna is one of the few athletes in OCR considered a living legend. She won World's Toughest Mudder in 2013. She finished second in 2014 in the team category. She's also the inventor of Blegg mitts, which she sells through her company with her partner, Amanda Turbo. Amanda, I know Turbo is not your last name. In third place, Christy Davies. Christy ran World's Toughest Mudder in 2017, finishing with 65 miles. She will also run Berlin's Toughest Mudder before World's Toughest Mudder 2018. For the men, Lachlan Danzy finished in first. You can learn more about Lachlan on our recent episode, number 80 overall, Australia's Toughest Mudder preview. Lachlan is a three-time winner of the 24-hour enduro race held each year in Australia. We're going to talk with Lachlan about his win this weekend in a future episode. In second was Jared Cola. Jared is a well-known OCR athlete in Australia Lachlan Danzy made it a point to name him as a contender to win Australia's Toughest when we talked last week. In third place was Brody Gardner. Brody is not a big name on the Australian OCR scene, but he is well known over there as a professional athlete. He is a national triathlon champion in Australia. Congratulations to all the podium athletes and everyone who ran Australia's Toughest Mudder. We're going to have a deep dive into the numbers and stats behind Australia's Toughest Mudder in a future episode, and I remember I owe you the same about Europe's Toughest Mudder Midlands as well. Don't worry, we're going to get there. But for now, let's read some iTunes reviews. On Amazon, Chad Hum writes, "Great to hear from the top athletes in the sport. 5 stars. Will's passion for OCR and the Tough Mudder community leads to great interviews and insights. My favorite podcast for long runs and long pizza buffet visits. 5 stars. Thank you, Chad. I appreciate you saying that. Chad says we are his favorite podcast for long runs and long pizza buffet visits. So, glad to hear I'm helping with your training goals, Chad. Well done. You can be a part of the show, like Chad, by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Amazon. If you have an iPhone, open the Purple Podcast app and search for World's Toughest Podcast. Click our logo and then scroll down to click on Write a Review. If you are on Android, open your internet browser and go to Amazon.com. Search for World's Toughest Podcast, click our logo, then click the Enable Skill box. Then click the Write a Customer Review box, and write away. I will read it in a future episode. Allison Tai finished in first place at Australia's Toughest Mudder. This is her third Toughest Mudder win, tying her with Lindsay Webster for the most Toughest Mudder wins by a woman. It's time to talk with Allison Tai. Let's go to the phones. Allison Tai, thanks for coming back on the show.
Oh, thanks. Anytime. Always a pleasure.
You just won Australia's Toughest Mudder with 35 miles. Congratulations.
Thanks.
How was the race?
Oh, it was really good. It was hilly, that's for sure. The terrain wasn't like super mountainous or whatever, but they certainly made total use of the hills there. So it was fun. It was hilly. The obstacles were good. The crowd there was just amazing. Of course, Aussies are just fun people, so really good time racing with them. And, there's a few of the regular World's Toughest Mudder crew out as well. So it ended up just being a really, really fun event.
Who did you see over there?
Well, Jim Campbell was there, and Andrew Robinson and Scotty Thornton. So I got to run with those two for a little bit. And, of course, the legendary Deanna Blake was there with her pits. Amanda was also there. And Alicia, who it's funny because he wasn't even there. But Trevor Psychos' partner, she was there just to hang out and help pit. So, yeah, I'm probably missing some people, but it was pretty lively, and it was definitely super fun just to have them there. Just kind of a new race and a new venue for sure, but to have some familiar faces is always kind of nice too, and just to have some folks to run with and chat while you pass through the pits. So yeah, it was good.
What was it like running with Deanna Blake? Australia is her home turf.
It's always awesome with Deanna. She's just a monster. I guess she hasn't even really been running. She's been really focused on CrossFit, and so I don't think she's run since World's Toughest Mudder. So, of course, just, last minute, she decides to hop in and, just smokes it, and she's just such an awesome character, and one of those people that's just been through so much in life and learned so many lessons, and it's just always a joy to be around.
This is your 7th Toughest Mudder. How did Australia's Toughest compare to some of those other ones?
I feel like it was a lot the same. They did a really good job kind of emulating what Tough Mudder has already done very right with the series. There was a new obstacle for me, which was cool, the Leap of Faith. obstacle that they have there is definitely different, and something that I was a little bit nervous about doing, just because I feel like we've seen now some of the obstacles over and over again at Toughest, and you just kind of get really familiar with them. So it's both like exciting and a little nerve-wracking to have a totally new one thrown at you. But it was basically like you jump off this platform and grab onto a cargo net, and it's probably just a little bit farther out than rope-a-dope, but easily grabbable, and then you climb up and over the cargo net and go down the other side. So it was really fun, new obstacle, and other than that, it was very similar, like the format and just kind of the way everything shook out. It was kind of similar but different, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
How did it stack up as far as difficulty? Was it one of the harder ones you've done, one of the easier ones?
I wouldn't say necessarily harder, because then you do have like opportunity to walk more. You could definitely have run the whole course. It was all runnable. So I'd say like the majority of the hills were probably 15 to 25% grade, so still within like the runnable range. But there's a few parts where it just made a little bit more sense to power hike and stuff like that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a harder course, but it does mean that that's going to be a slower course. So it wasn't the fastest course I've ever raced, but it had a really good variety in terms of the terrain. Some of it was runnable on fire roads, and some of it was like weird cambered grass like we had in Atlanta last year, where you're like kind of running sideways and hoping your IT or ankle doesn't blow out. And then there's a little bit of technical terrain, a little bit of stuff where you could shut your mind off. So it was just a really good variety of things. And then the hills just kind of made it interesting. So I wouldn't say it was harder. Definitely the penalties were super short. So like some of them you're like, what? Like, I think it actually takes less time to run than it does to do the obstacle. But other than the penalties being short, it was a tough course and not the fastest one I've been on, but really good variety in terms of terrain. It was on this weird, it was in this folk fest area, so of course we never have any idea what it's going to look like, right? Until the sun comes up. But as the sun's coming up, you see that there's all these weird giant Woodstock-esque giant hearts and all these crazy hippie statues 3 stories high, and it was really nice with the mountains in the background and the sun coming up behind. So I think the last lap was probably my absolute favorite, because it's just all these crazy things we've been running around and not noticed all through the night are just appearing, and then the sunset behind the mountains, and it's totally quiet all night. And then as soon as the sun starts coming up, it's the forest is just so alive with sounds, and just all these crazy birds and just different animals chirping away in the forest. So the last lap was kind of intensified that feeling of the sun coming up is already so rejuvenating, but just with all the different stuff that was revealed and the noises coming from the woods, it was really, really cool.
Tell me about the race part of it. How did the beginning of the race go? Did you come out fast? Were you pacing yourself?
I would say just kind of normal. I feel like I've done so many of these now that it's almost okay, so for the first hour, this is the pace, and this is the effort you put out, and so you end up almost going into kind of after you've done enough of them, it almost becomes just a reflex, right? That you figure out how the pacing works and stuff like this for an 8-hour event. I just kind of started off, fairly regularly, and then they rolled open the obstacles like they normally do. So after an hour, you're never sure, right? Because they said after an hour the obstacle's open, you're not sure if it's going to be a rolling start or whatnot. I don't think they said before we left. So then it's just figuring out which ones are going to open, and trying to pace yourself adequately. And yeah, it was very similar to the ones that you would find in North America in respect to how they laid it out. So
I heard they did something different with the obstacles as far as opening them and closing them at kind of random times.
Oh yeah, it was kind of like they used to do, right? Where they'd just be and this is closed. And I think a lot that we're planning to close. But for instance, that the one where you jump out the leap of faith, on my last lap, I went to enter it, and it was all blocked off. But there's nobody there, so it took like a while to be like, and this is where you go, because normally you'd run through the obstacle, but it was all taped up. So trying to kind of figure out where then you can go. And of course, there's less people on the course at that time as well. So it was a bit tricky to like navigate some of the obstacles that I guess weren't planned closures, but it does actually kind of make it neat then. It makes it a little more interesting at the end of the race when you're like, oh, this one's closed, oh, this one's open. But yeah, definitely they closed Arctic Enema pretty early on. And a number of the ones like at the finish line, I think they closed. They had the Kong Infinity didn't have the monkey bars. It was just kind of that rolling spindle. And I know they closed that one fairly early as well. But I feel like that one was probably a planned closure. So
tell me about the end of the race. You and Deanna Blake finished in second place. When did you know you were in first place? When did you know you had the win for the race?
Oh, I think it was like 5 o'clock ish. John was like, you don't even have to go about for another lap. And I was like, that seems weird. And I don't trust your math. Because at one point, my husband's crewing for me. We had this conversation. So I'm going up the slip wall on Happy Ending. And he's like, so second place is close behind you, but I don't know who they are or where they are. It's like, what? Like, this is not like... I need some concrete details here. But then he insists he never said that. So I'm like, I don't see anybody. Like, how did they come up and who are they? And I don't know. So there's sort of an air of like distrust in what he was saying. I think he was like, you could just stop now. But so I feel like at about 5 o'clock, he was like, yeah, you've got this, because I was ahead by a lap or whatnot. So I went back out, and then I was thinking about going back out for another lap, but we're like, looks like at this point that you're safe, and, may as well save the legs for OCR 24 in a few weeks. And I kind of felt like I had a good run, and I was ready to be done. You know how it ends up being at about 7 o'clock in the morning where you're like, yeah, I could stop now. There are those people that are so hardcore, and they're like, I can do another lap. I'm doing another lap. But that person is not me. I'm like, I would like to go for a hamburger right now. That sounds like a good plan.
What do you go eat after Toughest Mudder? You find a hamburger?
Oh my gosh, yeah, we all went out for brunch, and I made them make me a hamburger at this one place, and it was ridiculous. Like, it was like, I don't know, 12 inches tall. I had to like squish it down and like bite off sides, like gnaw at it, but it was amazing. Yeah, it's funny, I'm not a big meat eater, but after like a long race like that, when I've been like shoving sugar down my face, it's kind of like all I want is just like a big hunk of like fatty meat. It's bizarre, but it's kind of one of those you gotta listen to your body times.
Your husband John is your pit crew. You mentioned at World's Toughest Mudder, he was caught on video with all of his clipboards and his charts and his statistics he was tracking for you. Is John kind of an advantage for you in these races?
Oh, absolutely. Like he's usually like totally with the schedules and whatnot. Of course, we had the kids here as well, so he's kind of straddling both worlds. Trying to be like Mr. Dad and figure out the race and statistics and stuff like that. But he's very analytical, and he's an awesome resource. He knows racing. He's done it, himself, and so he's just a really, really awesome person to have in my corner. And he also just kind of knows what to say to me normally, unless he's lying to me mid-race just to mess with me, but which he does sometimes too. Actually, good story about John. One time, one of my first obstacle races, it was at the end of a race, and he didn't realize that second place was right behind me, and he told me to go down. There is a really confusing like bunch of different chutes basically, and he didn't see it from my side, and he told me to go down the wrong chute instead of the finishing chute as a joke, and I ended up losing by like 3 seconds. He was like, oh my god, I feel so bad. I'm like, why would that be funny even? I don't understand your sense of humor. But all in good fun. You can only you either really trust him because he's on the ball, or he's messing with you, so you never know. Just for a laugh.
What was it like having your kids out there? What did they think of the whole thing?
Well, my 7-year-old had actually planned to crew for me the entire race, and then she started watching Little Mermaid and just stayed up all night watching movies instead. But they're so used to it. They've just grown up around it that it's just not even weird for them anymore. So they came out after and kind of hung out as soon as the sun. It's cold here at night, so they didn't want to be out too much. But we rented a camper van, so they mostly just hung out in here. And they headed out in the morning when the sun came up and kind of took in all the festivities, and they're at the point where they get it now. So that's kind of neat. But it's just something that's just so usual for them that they don't even think it's weird that Mummy's covered in mud and running around all night. But it's definitely neat, right? Like, I think we're like in such a fun, pioneering time in this sport. And just to be able to nab any first is neat. And just to be a part of their first event. And the people here in the whole OCR culture, and particularly the Tough Mudder culture here, they're just so proud of this event and so proud of what it is that they're doing here. And this kind of like culture that they're co-creating, and to be a part of that and to be so welcomed is always just like a huge honor, right? And to be able to go out there and have fun, and like just those micro moments when you're out on course bonding with people and just kind of soaking up being a part of this like tight-knit community that they've created is pretty something you can't really get anywhere else. So it's a pretty neat thing that we have going on here.
Your next race is the 24-hour Enduro World Championships. How do you feel going into that?
Pretty good. It's one of those kind of, because they haven't released a lot about it, or at least I haven't heard a lot about it. So I'm kind of feeling like I'm going in blind, which is kind of exciting and kind of terrifying all at once. So I'm hoping that they'll release more stuff, especially if like everything's mandatory. I think that could be really fun, right? You could end up sitting in an obstacle for like 18 hours if you're struggling with it. So.
Allison, do you have any sponsors or anything you'd like to plug?
No, just always my coach Yancey. He's just incredible, such a supportive and amazing guy, and such like fun programming and stuff. I've really been enjoying that. And of course, huge thanks to Tough Mudder. Just a huge support, and I've just recently joined the Goat Tough crew, so that's been fun. They've been really welcoming. And yeah, that is about it. My Advanced City OCR peeps, of course, as always. It's kind of nice just to, even if you are like on a totally different side of the world racing, to see that they're as supportive of you could possibly ask anybody to be on social media and stuff like that. So I kind of always feel like I have them with me when I'm racing, and that's a really, really incredible thing. So huge shout out to them and the whole Tough Mudder community. And yeah, Thanks for doing this podcast, Will. I know I'm always looking forward to the episodes and making sure I get them in before I tackle the course. So I listened to the one with Lachlan right before I went, and that was really helpful just to kind of get a heads up on what it was going to be like, and see some of the new obstacles before hitting the course. So. And
then he went and won the whole thing for the men.
Yeah, that was pretty neat to see too. It was pretty tight, hey? Like a pretty tight race on the men's side the whole time it looked. And yeah, it was pretty awesome to see him fly across the finish line with a ear-to-ear grin, and clearly a hard-fought battle that he ended up winning. So,
Allison, any last thoughts on Australia's Toughest Mudder?
None. Yeah, just excited for the rest of the season.
Allison Tai, thanks much.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Allison Tai for appearing in this episode. Well done, Allison. Every time she's on, Allison Tai makes this show better. Do you want to make this show better? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Let me know what you like, or maybe what you don't like. I would appreciate the feedback. Thank you. I will talk with you soon. Go spend time with someone you love. Like in Australia, maybe.